So just starting with building a 1 where we have the wall and the roof, what we can start to do is create our UV maps, which, because they're such simple objects, is really pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and switch to just my UV layout, where I have the texture window open. And I want to start with the walls and just kind of get a sense of the overall scale before I create a new texture. So we're going to switch over to the UV polygons, and we can see the auto-generated ones, which aren't really going to work. So if we go to the UV commands, or sorry, the projection under UV mapping, and most of these windows should be set up in the default UV mapping interface, which you'll see for the UV edit or BP for body paint, user editing. So we can go through a couple of different options for setting this up, and we really need to take a look at the overall scale. I'm going to switch to the world system and go to cubic, and we're going to see a couple of different options in how it's stretching out the object. The most accurate is going to be box, and the box is going to give us probably one of the best scale references to keep everything consistent based on its scale of the object, to keep the texture consistent throughout the objects. We don't want to have any massive scale changes between different sections. So what we can see that we need to do is we have a lot of negative space on the top and the bottom. So I do want to create basically a texture that's going to be twice as wide as it is high, because I do want to have a separate texture for the roof than the walls, just because of the way the normal maps are going to be set up. It's going to be a lot easier to fine-tune and tweak certain settings if they are separated, rather than having to manipulate every single image map separately if they both contain the roof and the wall. So what we can do is go up to File and New Texture from the texture window. And I'm going to create a width of 2048 and a height by 1024. And we can give it a name, building 1, or building underscore 1 walls. And although this is going to be a rather large image map for the scale of this object, it will allow us to use it later in order to create a higher resolution model for more of a mid-distant object. So instead of having one really far away, we could have one that's about the halfway point before the close-up objects, and we could just increase the resolution and model to the texture. And this way we already have the texture set up if we want to do that. And now we can go ahead and just select these commands again, changing the projection. So using the world system fit to selection box, we can see that it is stretched out, and really these commands for it being perfect work best with a square texture. So I just need to manipulate and change the size a little. What I want to do is switch over to the point mode, and using the live selection we can just select these points on the bottom. And these are the points in the polygon for the bottom polygon, and what's going to really not even going to be showing as part of the texture. So we don't really need to worry about it as far as its position or anything, but right now it's kind of getting in the way. So what I want to do is just switch to the move tool, and we can just move this up within the current map, and just make it so the points are kind of lining up with one of the walls. Now typically you'd want to avoid this kind of overlapping, but since we're not even going to see that, I just want that polygon there to really just prevent any light leaks from happening, just to keep the object closed. And the same thing with these top polygons too, the ones that are not part of the point. Those really aren't going to be seen because they're covered by the roof. So if you really want, one thing you could do is just move those points down and really give it no space whatsoever within the map. But since we have the point coming up, it's really not hurting anything for those being there. So once that's moved, we can go over to the UV commands and fit UV to canvas. Switch to the polygon mode first, and then fit UV to canvas, and now we have a really good consistent map where we have the front and the back and then the sides of the object, and they pretty much match up with the scale overall to the polygons to our map. Another thing I want to do is create a UV mesh layer. What this is going to allow me to do is, once I'm in Photoshop, have a nice reference in order to see each of the individual polygons, where they're showing up. It's going to be a lot easier to work with that way. And then once that layer is set up, we can just go ahead and save the texture. I'm going to be using a TIFF file, PSD layers, and this way we'll be able to have every single layer as part of one TIFF file. So all the different maps, color, diffusion, and normal. With the distant buildings, we may not really even need a bump map, depending on the detail of the normal. So then we can go ahead and just click OK and save that out. And we'll just have that with the name building 1 walls.